was the double attack that we earlier pointed out, queen to b7, but there is a defensive resource there. The black knight coming to d7, connecting the two rooks, and also making sure queen takes bishop isn't possible, and that's why maybe it does not work just in time there. So Magnus, with a lot of choices here, he could take the pawn back on c3, he could infiltrate with his own queen, or will he find some activity against black's offside queen on the right side of the board? He does take the pawn back, inviting a trade of rooks. Rook takes rook on Magnus's term will give him the A file.
It's the first time in 15 moves that we've got level material again. It's crazy, these sacrifices, such long-term ideas by these top players. And ultimately, Magnus emerges with a very small advantage.
Yeah, to be fair, when you compare the pieces, you go, actually, now that Firouzja's played knight bd7, the knights are on reasonable squares. The bishop is at least pointing towards the c5 pawn, which is a bit of a menace, but it's doing something useful. You can see the knight potentially coming into d5, but take a look at the bishop here from Magnus. The piece activity just feels a little bit stronger for white, and it feels like white has some more options. Not necessarily a winning position or anything like that, but it feels easier to play.
Easier to play, and Alireza pauses before moving the rook in the corner that's attacked. Does ultimately shift it and attack the white queen. Magnus is going to run away with that piece now, but the big question is whether black can take the c5 pawn next. If he restores the material balance, makes sure that it's only pawns on one flank, then Firouzja should be out of danger.
Well, there's also another pawn hanging on the board, the h3 one. Let's not forget about that. He's threatening c5, queen takes pawn as well, with some ideas of the knight jumping forward, maybe putting some pressure on Magnus's king. With this move, rook b8, first asking a question to Magnus's queen, where does he run?
Big moment, and I'm looking at the clock, I'm thinking this again is the best situation Firouzja's been in a while, and Magnus looks frustrated.
I think that's a great point. We're past move 20 now. I feel like so far in this match, there have been several instances where Firouzja's been down by 2 or 3 minutes on the clock by this point. That has not happened in this game. He hasn't got time to take solace from that at the moment, but we can see that this is a visible improvement from Alireza.
This is a completely shift in pace, on the board, psychologically, on the clock, everything. This is a totally different match, a totally different set from what we saw earlier on in the day. And now Alireza about to get more time on the clock than Magnus for the first time in this match, as Magnus dips below the 4:23 mark, still hasn't made a decision of where to move the queen, 2 pawns under attack. Alireza, I think he's ambitious about his chances. Magnus moves the queen to f4. Be careful, the black knight can't take on c5, the rook on b8 is hanging.
Great move by Magnus, maintaining some advantage due to the fact that black rook is so loose. But Firouzja now, at least he has a little bit of time, a few seconds, to mull over what to do. The move he wants to play is bishop takes pawn on c5, but some calculation needed. The black queen holding things together there might get hit. And Firouzja, big moment. He can't spend too long though.
Yeah, I'm trying to... Can he get away with bishop takes? It looks like he just about can, because maybe because the black queen is actually still on h5. It's easy to forget that it's still on the board, and it's a bit of a long-range piece there. So maybe that just about allows it to happen. But you're right, you can't take it with the knight. It has to be with the bishop.
I'm going to point out, Magnus blundered a rook in the last game. Like you guys said, with the queen on h5, that's going to be the recapture after bishop takes pawn. So possible, but something about that move Magnus does not like. He's perhaps also thinking about queen capturing the pawn on h3, the other one that's available, or maybe a rook slide over, hitting that bishop. A lot of options, and he's taking his time, Alireza is.
Yeah, you mentioned Magnus blundering a rook. He's done that a few times in recent history. He regularly blunders knights, I'm going to say. He blundered a knight against Hikaru in the final game, game 6 of their semi-finals. He blundered a knight against Firouzja in the previous encounter. It's always these knights on e4, knights on d2. It's always the same pattern that Magnus seems to have a blind spot. I'll just mention that here. Luckily, he's white, and luckily for him at least, he's white. And his knight, for now, not under threat, but just watch out for that later. Firouzja has found some weakness, but this move, he spent nearly 2 minutes now, nearly half his time on this one turn. He does take the pawn.
Well calculated. Good that he worked that out, but so much time spent.
That's exactly the point. It felt like a 2 to 3 move calculation, right? So Alireza would have thought deeper. He didn't spend 2 minutes just figuring out that he's got queen takes bishop at the end of that line. There's something more to this position. He's trying to think, because every piece is loose right now. That knight on d7 defends the rook on d8. It can come under fire immediately with the move rook to d1.
That sets a nasty trap. If the white rook does shift across to d1, black cannot play bishop takes bishop, as the white queen would be sacrificing itself on on the B8 square, just to break through onto the back rank with some checkmates. I don't know if Magnus Carlsen has spotted that. He's looking a bit deeper into the position, but let's check it out. The best move, rook to D1, attacking the black knight, undermining the bishop. Alireza Firouzja cannot play bishop takes bishop right now because queen takes rook would end in a checkmate after the queen is recaptured. Look at this, a back ranker. The black king trapped behind his own pawns. Alireza Firouzja cannot trade bishops right now. It's a key moment. He needs to find another solution, but he's down to 2 minutes. He does block the queen's path. That was the only way to survive.
So tricky there by Magnus, setting up that big trap. Because if you're black, you really want to liquidate pieces here. You want to get those trades in, but not giving him the chance. E5 hitting the queen. Magnus with an inaccuracy there. Queen's off the board. And now Alireza can trade on E3, destroying Magnus's pawn formation.
And this should be a drawn endgame. It's going to be bishop takes bishop. White's going to take the knight, the black knight, but rook and knight versus rook and bishop. Pawns are only on one flank of the board, only on one side. Knights are better than bishops. Firouzja's going to have to sit and suffer there for a long time. Only white can win. Magnus is now, I think, going to activate hustle mode. He's been reluctant to do it on the clock, but here we go. Can Firouzja hold what is a slightly unpleasant endgame?
I think he does it. He knows what's on the line right now, and at the end of it, if he holds this position with black, that is a massive, massive thing for him. I mean, it's almost like a slight victory here. He gets white in the next turn. Alireza, he pushes the G pawn, tying down black's king side. 3 pawns there. Bishop moves backwards. The knight's about to move forward. He first brings the king into the game.
Magnus grabbing space there with that pawn move to G5 to begin with, and he's going to start grinding, gets the pestle and mortar out. We've seen Magnus do this time and time and time again, but will he be able to convert something against what appears to be a little bit of a rejuvenated Firouzja? We've seen him pull out some unbelievable magic tricks in the last game, showing us some of his fantastic skill. We've also seen flashes of him breaking out of shall we say, the time-draining funk that he's been in, but there were still flashes of that where he did use a minute or two in the late middle game. But he is getting better at it, and you can feel the confidence starting to grow.
There we go, it's bullet time. The clock turns red for Firouzja. He needs to act quick. The white king is stepping up the board. This is what Magnus Carlsen calls anti-young player chess. He's killed the chance of white losing this game now. It's a race against the clock. Firouzja can't clarify the board though. He has no active plans as white steps forward.
And that's because of that 1 pawn on G5. It clamps down on those 3 pawns on F7, G7, H7. Any move by either of these pawns would lend black a huge weakness to deal with. Magnus, meanwhile, can jump around the board with his knight, now about to target the E5 pawn, defended by the bishop, but the knight comes further into the game, hitting the rook and the black F7 pawn, knight D6 in the air.
Knight is coming in, the white rook lands on the 7th rank first, followed by its knight. Black is in full defensive mode, all backs to the wall here. Firouzja needs to break out. He's got 40 seconds. You cannot sit still and do nothing anymore. Magnus will just bide time and go for you. And there we go, he does trade pawns. Here he needs to start trading rooks. Firouzja, he needs to get everything off the board within his last 30 seconds. We're going to see another race against the clock, but a totally different scenario this time, where it's going to be difficult to force Magnus Carlsen to blunder.
And this time, Magnus is going for Firouzja's clock. He's down in this set. He has to maximize his chances. He's not going to shy away from flagging him anymore in this match.
Magnus needs to make some quick moves. He has a 2-minute time advantage. It's going to be so difficult for Firouzja here. The black rook was almost trapped, creating some luft there, some escape squares. Black king shuffling. Magnus is pushing pawns. Black rook forced back. Still so unpleasant here, Tanya. The white knight dominates the bishop.
And no more pawns can be traded. And look at that. Magnus Carlsen, he wins a pawn, the first big advantage. He's converted his strategic points into a material advantage.
Go Firouzja creating some counterplay, hitting the white knight, which has to be defended now by the king or the rook. 1 pawn up, but it's not about the clock, about the pawns here. It's about the clock. Keep an eye on the red on your screens. Alireza Firouzja needs that fire, needs the speed.
He does, but will that even be enough with 11 seconds? And Magnus just playing this on endlessly, gives a check, drives the black king away. Magnus Carlsen winning now. He's trapped the bishop, and Alireza knows he resigns. Magnus Carlsen back in set 2.
Resignation. There we go with 8 seconds left to go. The speed was incredible. The number of moves that were played in the last 30 seconds of that game, formidable, but not enough to stop the tide that is world #1, Magnus Carlsen. He fights back, and set 2 is now level at 1 apiece.
Firouzja woke up in the second half of the previous game, but he also poked the bear. He woke up his opponent, Magnus Carlsen, who did activate hustle mode, went into what looked like a level endgame, but that proved knights are better than bishops when it's just pawns on one side of the board.
This game is no joke. This is white out survival. I absolutely love it. I really do. I help my mates conquer the icy field, gather resources, stone, wood, food, and more. I've already built my base. I also battle alliances to win rare items. I'm on my way to taking my city to the top of the ring. But
His center knight there, and Magnus Carlsen now at 1-1. It's match on. Firouzja needs to do it all over again.
Set 2 here. Magnus Carlsen up 1-0, and the second set is all square at 1-all. We'll be back here in just a moment with game number 3. Don't go anywhere.
Reach your impossible. Lenovo Legion.
Hello to my children back in the Philippines. Hello.
Hello everyone, we are here in Riyadh.
Hello Tyler, you are so short. Hi Mama, Baba, I made it. Hello everyone, hello my mom, my dad, Sultan. Abdulaziz, Shalan, you keep hanging your queen, don't hang your queen.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Hi from Riyadh.
Hello everyone, hello, here for Magnus. Here for Magnus. Let's go, chess.com. Magnus all the way. Hi everyone. Hello. Here's the biggest fan of Magnus Carlsen.
Adam.
Oh, I am the biggest fan of Magnus Carlsen.
I am the biggest fan of Magnus Carlsen.
Who you support?
Magnus بيفوز إن شاء الله. Magnus is going to win 100%.
It's all square in the second set here in the grand finals of chess at the Esports World Cup. Firouzja came out swinging and with 24 seconds left on his clock, managed to convert a winning position in game number one. The world number one, though, does not rest on his laurels pretty much ever because he immediately struck back with a victory, leading to a 1-all tie with 2 games remaining in this set.
And Carlsen keeping the speed, keeping the clock advantage, a massive part of his match strategy so far. It's paid off. Barring one blunder at the beginning of set 2, Carlsen has been in great form. Firouzja, though, it's level terms. He needs to forget set 1. He needs to forget that last game where he ended up losing on board and clock. And he knows he still has time to strike.
Controversial opinion, David. He needs to not forget that last game. He needs to not forget set 1 because he keeps getting into these positions where he is so under time pressure. He can't afford for that to happen indefinitely. He tried the opening switch up. It worked to an extent. He was doing very well in that last game until maybe move 25 or so. So he's taken some steps in the right direction, but we need more.
Another controversial opinion. The one game that Alireza won was Magnus's to give away. That was a one-move blunder that happened. Even in that one, Alireza really down on the clock. He finished it flawlessly. Regardless of that, it was incredible to watch the speed and the precision that he brought onto that one. But again, it came down to that one-move blunder. Turn the flip around. Every game that Magnus has won or has drawn, he has been on that driver's seat. He's been on the front foot, putting the pressure from the start until the end.
That is true. And taking inspiration from previous games is a key trait for any chess player. You need to learn from your mistakes. I'm going to say it's that move 20 to 30, move 20 to maybe even 35 period where he tanks too much. He needs to trust his instincts there. Even if it is chaos, even if he is worse, Alireza Firouzja has shown he can fight back when it becomes tactical. So he just needs to start from a level footing against Magnus.
But I like this opening that we've got because it has the makings of something tactical in the middle game, and that's what Alireza needs to do. Get his kind of position. Yep. Pull Magnus into those muddy waters, into those complications where it becomes difficult to respond, especially if the clock goes low. Now, Alireza, he first starts on the left side, then improves his piece on the right side. I'm also expecting him to play in the center with e4 coming soon enough.
Meanwhile, Magnus Carlsen with black, he's not willing to rest on his laurels and just kind of consolidate after winning the previous game. This is very ambitious from both sides. White has a slightly further advanced pawn on d5, but black has the connect 4 with a beautiful pawn chain from e7 to b4. And the black knight coming out to the edge of the board. I wonder what the strategies are. It's a bit of an odd kind of piece configuration, I'm going to say, from Alireza. Rarely in this type of structure do you see a double fianchetto from the white bishops.
And we've got some rather interesting pawns already on a5 and d5 without additional central support just yet, although e4 can be played. It's really quite aggressive in terms of space grabbing out of the opening here from white. It's interesting.
Space monster Alireza Firouzja pushing those pawns forward, but with great space comes great responsibility.
I'm sure that's what the quote was.
That's exactly the quote. I believe Spider-Man dropped that line, but yeah, you need to back up pawn pushers by controlling space with your pieces. For now, he's behind in development, needs to get his king castled, needs to develop his queenside knight. And early days here, but down on time already.
And that's the thing, right? This is not that critical moment where you spend 2 minutes. This has been the surprise of the match so far, just Alireza's pace early on in the game. There are options in this position. You know, you could go short castle, maybe you could push the H pawn, maybe you could get your queen out and then think about going E4. But whatever you decide, play it fast. This is not the moment you go down by 2 minutes on the clock.
I'm looking at this, and honestly, the only words that are going through my head right now is not again. I'm so afraid for Firouzja here, based on what we have seen so far in this entire grand final match. I don't know how much of this he can afford to do. This is really quite scary now.
Yeah, he plays for France these days, Firouzja. It's deja vu happening again on the clock. He develops his knight given a question mark. I think 99% of humans would have actually castled their king there. But the fact that he did pause for what was a minute and a half refusing to castle shows he's got other plans in mind. A bit of a mysterious one. And look at this. Magnus is the one gaining space this time, kicking away the white knight in order to win a pawn. Magnus is taking in the center. D5 is about to drop.
That's, yeah, a little bit mysterious, given that was a minute and a half. Magnus, like, hang on a second. We're just going, let's grab a two-mover.
This is not a blunder by Firouzja. This is what he wants. He's trying to create an imbalance where he trades off the bishop. Magnus's g5 pawn will become a target. He finds a nice spot for his knight to jump into. The bishop on g2, pinning that black knight on d5. Yes, I see the evaluation bar. It says it's horrible for black, but for white even. For practically here for Alireza, I think this is the kind of position he's aiming for. I don't think he missed g5.
But a postscript to that, Tanya. When Magnus has 9 minutes to figure out how to get out of this, that's really different to when they have 2 minutes or less. And I'm really worried that Magnus will find a way just because it's so early in the game and he has so much time left.
That's the big point here, right? You flip the script on that clock, Magnus down to 6.5, Alireza at 8.5, and you'd be saying this is great. But look at that, he's still going aggressive. He is going for the attack now, trying to open up the H line, access denied.
Cool, so what we're saying here is ignore the evaluation bar for now. It's very much a strategic pawn sacrifice to see if we can wrangle something out of the middle game here.
Yeah, I think in the back of his mind, Alireza, maybe even at the front of his mind, he knows that this is not sound. It's what we call a dubious sacrifice. But sometimes in chess, these types of gambits, they do pay off. It's all about the mindset, all about trying to unsettle your opponents. And Magnus these days, the Magnus iteration of 2025, prefers to sacrifice pawns rather than take pawns. So I do understand his mindset here, Firouzja, but the white king about to castle, he still needs some real action. Not too many pieces can go towards the black king for now. That's the big issue. And again, the clock, just compounding that.
And that's a fantastic move by Magnus, you know, g4, just making sure that no open lines, open diagonals, weaknesses are given, and just keeping everything under control. Not a single pawn trade, which means not a single file allowed for the rook into an attack.
Look at the body language, look at the facial expression, look at the clock. I feel like g4 here at the end of this continuation might be what Firouzja missed.
Possible.
Or at least underestimated. Maybe he just assumed he could blow open the king side there, go for the black king.
Yeah, because if the rook was still on a8, for example, a knight jumping into f4 creates all sorts of fun problems. You can see that with one more tempo, white creates all sorts of issues for black. But will that ever come?
Because Magnus is one move away from creating issues of his own, right? Knight coming on to c3, the central pawn, he's up one, start moving up the board, kicking out Firouzja's pieces, that knight on c4.
Right.
And it might be Alireza on the defense and down a pawn.
It's coming. The black knight forced into the square it wanted to use anyway. It's a very committal decision from Firouzja, but there we go. It's that knight f4 move you mentioned. The knight is coming towards the black king, maybe threatening a check on h5. Can Magnus deal with that? Is he going to brace for impact somehow? At least creating something for Firouzja. I like this last move, this last idea from him.
I do, and I think the evaluation bar in this position is a little deceptive. From a practical perspective, you're black, your pawn on g4, king out at g7, the white knight about to swoop to h5, jump over, and then the queen coming to that h6 square. It can start feeling scary, but Magnus completely ignores it. He literally doesn't care.
It's really quite worrying. You've played the knight h5 check, and you're going, hang on a second, where are the entry squares for the queen? Could the king even come up to g6 to prevent the queen from coming up? But who wants to play that kind of move in that sort of uncomfortable position? Definitely far from over this, and the eval bar does not tell even a quarter of the story here. The degree of discomfort in the black camp right now is immense.
Yeah, in the meantime, Firouzja continues to think, continues to tank. He needs to get his rooks into the action. Without the rooks, you might not attack. White's bishop is never really joining in, blocked by its own pawn, and Magnus has a total clamp over the dart squares. So strategically, black is just winning. Pawn up and the bind. Firouzja needs to deliver checkmate if he's going to save this game.
What's the wild idea then? Are we talking like queen up to d3, king d2 to bring the other rook across? Like, what's the wild, weird anti-positional idea that actually gives us a reasonable chance here?
That's the $250,000 question, right?
Well, yeah.
The 1,000 point question. And right now, the white knight jumping into the center. I still feel Firouzja's king is going to castle on the king side. Maybe he'll push the f-pawn to open up lines for the rook a bit later on. It still takes a while. And in the meantime, Magnus has a few moves. Will he develop black's bishop? At least not clear what Magnus is doing next. He's prevented any pawn pushes for Firouzja. So Magnus reduced to piece play. And not easy to bring out the black queen either.
And I like this move by Alireza because it stops Magnus from getting his knight to the center of the board. Knight d4, not allowed anymore. Knight takes knight would win a pawn. And also, if you trade on Alireza's terms by capturing the knight on d5, I think he intends to capture with the pawn, opening up that E line to eventually get his rook into the game. So Magnus just keeping the tension there, pushes that E pawn forward. And now for Alireza, could he take on c3, double down on that d6 weakness? Because this last move leaves a backward pawn for Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah, it looks really quite committal there because the pawn on d6 is permanently quite weak. But you have to remember, with the material advantage and the fact that Magnus has those knights so cemented, the knight on b5 is still helping to defend that pawn as well. Is it a long-term weakness? Absolutely. But I don't necessarily see how it's going to be targeted effectively.
And Magnus is going to shut the door. He's going to shut the d-file by planting the black knight in the center of the board. So it's going to be very difficult to get at that backward pawn. I agree, long-term weakness. The problem is here, white's knight looks nice, but can be removed by a bishop. Black's knight cannot be removed at all, and a shake of the head there from Firouzja. It's going to be very difficult now to break out and get any attack going. The white pieces have been forced into reverse gear.
You mentioned earlier on, David, moves 20 to 35 are going to be critical. Well, let's have a quick glance at the clock. Let's check in with what the situation is. It's not as bad as it has been at some points in this match, but 6.5 minutes plays 3. I don't think anyone can realistically argue that's good either.
Especially with no open lines on the board, especially if you're Alireza down a pawn, down a set in this match, you want about 7-8 minutes on the clock. You want to be the one ahead on it right now. Magnus, meanwhile, he's striking at the other pawn. He says, one's not enough. I'm coming for the one on a5 as well.
Yeah, Magnus wants to take on a5. In the meantime, Firouzja is hitting the g4 pawn. That's Magnus's only real weakness. If you defend it with a fellow pawn, I think Firouzja's intention is to blow the king side. He needs ways in towards the black king. Pawn to f3 is very likely on the agenda next. But Magnus will be looking to try and deal with that.
h5 would then leave a weakness on that square once trades happen after f3. Will Magnus go on the defense with his queen, or will he capture on a5? And I think if he does that, if you trade the a pawn for the g pawn, then it gets really complicated because your king on g7 is suddenly under fire. Firouzja.
Nice. And he does take the a5 pawn, so allowing some counterplay. Magnus Carlsen, I think this is going to be a real exciting moment for Firouzja. At least he needs to just be taking on g4 immediately. Why else would you put your queen on d1? Why is he pausing? Take that pawn off the board. Suddenly white has access to some squares. There we go. It's a 1 pawn advantage still for Magnus Carlsen, but suddenly you could imagine the Black King coming under some fire.
You need to not see ghosts at this point. 2 minutes 30 plays 5 minutes. Firouzja has been exceptional throughout the entirety of the Esports World Cup, but you cannot be consistently playing against the best player in the world so far down on the clock. He recognizes this, of course. He would be a fool not to, but he has to do even more. He has to really dig deep now to try and come out on top.
All right, but we're going to see some forcing moves, so hopefully he will play faster. And look at that, Magnus plays an unexpected move, and Firouzja ready with his response, comes back with the knight, bishop takes pawn, hits that rook. Will we see some simplification? Magnus Carlsen would be very happy with that. That knight on d4, far better than Firouzja's bishop on g2, if knight takes bishop, queen takes knight was to happen.
On the bright side, the white queen can at least finally get active. There is one check available for Firouzja. You still need to follow up. It's not going to be easy, but one active piece, then you can evacuate the white rook, get it out the way. This is, again, the best position he's had in a while, but he's just not trusting his instincts. There we go. It is a check. The Black King runs. The rook does move. And Magnus still has some work to do. It's all about the black a-pawn, whether that's going to be quick enough to run down the board, or if Firouzja is able to create counterplay in time.
Still up a pawn. I love where he's placed his bishop. Magnus Carlsen has, taking away all the jumping squares from that white knight. Firouzja now threatening a checkmate in one. Watch out, move that rook away or defend it. He moves it to the 7th rack, making sure that e7 also remains protected.
The white bishop is so ineffective. It's just watching the action happen. There we go. It does retreat in the end. He's aiming to reposition it. I'm not sure exactly where. Maybe just on d3 as a defender. But Magnus getting closer and closer with his queenside play.
So many problems to solve. I was even thinking about what would happen if white had to play king h2, with the idea of bringing the bishop up to h3 to, trade a bad piece for a good one. But you can't do that because of knight f3 check. It's so frustrating to try and unbind yourself from this position.
The queen on h6 stuck. The knight on e3 can't move forward. The bishop on f1, hard to imagine an active square here. Yes, you can go up the board, but no diagonals to cover there. The rook on a1 stopping the a-pawn from moving forward. Looks like paralysis for the white pieces in this position. Magnus makes an inaccuracy, but I think you take that, chuck it out the window. It's just a move, passing the ball to Firouzja, knowing that he's reaching the 1 minute mark.
Yeah, unless we see a massive swing in eval, let's ignore those board annotations for now. That question mark, definitely because Magnus is playing quick moves for now. Good enough moves. We would call them the 80% type of moves where it might not be the best, but it's good enough not to change the eval at all. And he's only going to wait until Firouzja's down to that 30-second mark again before changing the pace. The black rook retreating again, not creating any damage. He's just passing the ball back to Firouzja, and the red appears. It's bullet time.
It's bullet time, and Magnus has an idea. That rook could transfer itself to that left flank behind the a-pawn and start pushing it, which is why Firouzja was forced to bring back the queen, attacking that f6 pawn. Magnus does not repeat this. He's not going to bring his rook back. Whoa, he's sacrificing the f6 pawn.
He knows he can get the queens off the board. Next move, Magnus Carlsen, he's going to swing the black queen across to g7 in front of his own king. He's going to go for the trade. And Firouzja, if the queens disappear, it's all about the black a-pawn. 40 seconds, though. He needs to decide. Queens off the board or on the board. Just make a move.
But how do you decide? Both are equally bad. Also, you've got no time. Alireza Firouzja frozen with no good options on the board. He jumps in with a knight. Magnus, he can trade. And look at Alireza. It's almost like he's giving up.
Looks so frustrated. I've never seen him look this helpless, Alireza, on the camera. He can give a check with his bishop. He drops his queen and he drops his queen. Alireza Firouzja. It's a simple night for him to end that game. The writing was on the wall anyway, but Magnus Carlsen takes the win. He's so close now.
A blunder ends game number 3, but not for the first time in this match. 4 minutes versus 1 minute. The clock tells all. Time trouble seems to be reigning supreme in this grand final. Magnus Carlsen is now potentially a game away from winning the grand finals.
Blunders do not appear out of a vacuum in chess. This is a result of Magnus's consistent pressure on the board in every single move, pretty much from the start, with the black pieces, not only of this game, but of the entire match itself. And that head nod by Magnus tells you everything you need to know about how he's feeling, about his chances right now. And a stunning finish here. Alireza Firouzja, lost on the board, eventually makes a one-move blunder, trying to avoid those queen trades, stepping back. But that's not good enough. The knight jumps in, picks the queen. Alireza resigns.
Wow, and it's 2 games in a row, 2 wins in a row for Magnus Carlsen, who actually lost the first game of this set. It is match point, and a draw would seal things for him. With the white pieces, Magnus, he very rarely loses a game. He did lose one to Hikaru, so some inspiration needs to be taken there for Firouzja, but that one, not enough. The nerves are going to be settling for both players. Firouzja has to maintain some hope.
Nerves are going to be jangling for Alireza Firouzja. He needs to win. Magnus Carlsen needs only a draw, and he starts with the white pieces. David, few in the world, if any, can make a comeback from this situation.
It's possible. It's possible. It's not going to be easy, though. Firouzja has to start. Step 1, it's basic. Stay up on time.
The arrow is drawn and Magnus is loading it into the bow. Game number 4. This might be the end of the road for Team Falcons here at chess at the Esports World Cup. Firouzja needs to win on command with the black pieces in order for this set to go to Armageddon. Very possible, but let's see how this pans out.
Magnus Carlsen, whenever he's happy with a draw with white, he opens with his king's pawn. It's just a fact, he knows his openings. It's so difficult to create winning chances with black. He tries the Sicilian Alireza Firouzja. He's met with the Alapin, the C3 Sicilian. This is something Magnus has used on multiple occasions, including in the World Cup final against Prague, when he just needed a draw with white. Firouzja, he needs something special now.
And David, I know that the Alapin Sicilian is also one of your pet openings, something that you've employed so many times. Magnus Carlsen does it every time that he needs to shut down the game. Where do you think, approaching this as blacks, as with the black pieces, will Alireza find his chances? What are the plans that he needs to put into place here?
Yeah, I think steering away from some of the main lines is the key. There are a lot of forcing lines in this opening. That's why Magnus has gone for it. There's a lot of opening theory that leads to sterile inequality, where you don't really get out into this game. You don't really maintain any winning chances. Okay, I was going to say, play something offbeat. Pawn to b6, we see the eval bar rise. That is very offbeat. Doesn't fight for the center, but I totally understand the reasoning for it.
I was going to ask you, when you would play the Alapin, was there a move by black that you feared that perhaps Alireza could try?
Pawn to d6 is the best move, but in terms of winning with black, I'm not so sure. Equalizing is normally the goal in chess with black, but not enough this time. b6, he just wants to fianchetto his bishop. Magnus might be forced to attack if Firouzja doesn't play in the center. Magnus is going to go on the front foot, but maybe that's not what he wants to do.
And for white, one of the very key ideas is to go d4 in these positions. You want to get that center control, get the bishop out to c4, try attacking the knight as well. But Magnus, he takes a pause, so definitely b6, a surprise.
So, Magnus Carlsen down on the clock. Okay, not by much, but it's so rare in this grand final, we might as well mention it when it happens. Alireza Firouzja, though, not looking just for an equal position. We need to win, remember. Pawn takes pawn in the center of the board. Firouzja looking like he wants to hopefully start building a little bit of clock advantage. Recaptures with the knight. And finally, Firouzja goes down to below 9 minutes. Still very, very early on in this game.
Still just move 6, and both players definitely freestyling. Neither side has studied this one before, we can guarantee that. Knight takes pawn on d4. Normally you want the queen there, but Magnus senses the white knight will be very active. The white queen could jump out early in this scenario, and Firouzja needs to just trust himself, make moves at this point. The bishop comes out quickly. I like the way he's handled this opening, I've got to say, Alireza. I think he'll get some chances at some point. The black knight kicked back meanwhile, and the game goes on.
It does go on, and this rivalry goes on. You know, I'm thinking right now of back in 2021 when Magnus Carlsen shocked the world, moved away from the World Championship crown, walked away from it, but said that he would be willing to fight if it was Alireza Firouzja who would challenge him, who would go on to win and then challenge him. That would make Magnus interested in getting back to the World Championship. That's the kind of respect he had. That's the kind of challenge he wanted to relish against the prince, Alireza Firouzja. And we never got that classical World Championship match, but we're getting the matchup here at the biggest global esports stage, at the esports arena. The king versus the prince, but so far, it's been a Magnus Carlsen show.
Do you think maybe that that actually plays on Firouzja's mind as well, knowing that Carlsen has said that about you? It's very difficult not to let that affect you psychologically, going, ooh, this is the match that he said he'd be happy to play. I really need to not disappoint. I need to go in with a bang. I need to really prove myself. And so far, we've seen flashes of that brilliance that does enable him to compete with Carlsen at the highest level. That said, he hasn't been able to consistently show that throughout this grand final.
Si bank itu mudah. Buka rekeningnya mudah, ada transfer gratis sampai dengan 100 kali, dan ada bunga.
Best ever player, you can say, oh, thank you, I'm going to prove you right. Or you feel the pressure, you feel the expectation. And I mean, instinct-wise, we've seen it so many times. Firouzja digs himself out of trouble on the clock. That's because his instincts are just fantastic. And there we see Team Liquid and the fans looking happy right now. But yeah, Firouzja just hasn't been trusting himself. He needs to go for it now. Pawn to h4, not liked by the computer, I should mention. Magnus Carlsen wants to win this one in style. He's trying to punish black for not finishing development, not castling yet. But the white e-pawn, a bit weak. I'm liking Firouzja's chances here if he can strike somehow in the center.
This move just makes me feel like Magnus wants to have fun in this game. There's absolutely no reason for him to go for this. You know, you play the Alipin, it signals that you want to keep things under control. Then you push the H-pawn voluntarily instead of continuing with getting development and getting your king to safety. Instead of continuing with getting development and getting your king to safety, Magnus Carlsen is in for a fight, but that...
Give up hope at any point yet.
Very easy to forget sometimes that our champions, our heroes, the GOATs, are human as well. And, you know, at some point, the torch will pass from Magnus Carlsen to the younger generation. He's here to say, yes, it will happen, just not today.
If Alireza wins this game and makes the comeback into the match to force an Armageddon, that will be a huge momentum shift. I'd go on to say that he'd be a favorite in that Armageddon, you know, given his speed skills, especially when you're down to 30 seconds. That is his best hope right now. And I think the way Magnus is playing, pushing his pawns, delaying his development, this is going to be a feisty game.
I'm going to call it. I think this is going to get crazy. I don't know the result, of course. Difficult to make any predictions here, but I feel that Firouzja is going to get some chances in this one. Already some tactics in the air. The most obvious move would be to push a pawn forward to break open the black bishop, but maybe we can investigate a bit further because Alireza Firouzja has what could be a golden opportunity to shock Magnus Carlsen right now. Not only can he open up that bishop, he can do it forcefully and in style. Knight takes pawn. If the white bishop takes back, then the black bishop takes on f3, removing the defender, hitting the white queen, and when the white queen recaptures, when the dust settles, bishop takes bishop, black has won a pawn with a nice pin to boot. If we go back, after knight takes e5, if the white knight recaptures, then black just says, calm, d6, open the diagonal for my bishop, please, and look at the white knights, look at the black bishop. It's sniping, it's going to regain the material with interest. This is super complicated. White can even give a check at the end of this with his queen. The game goes on, but Firouzja, he has to take risks like this. He has to gamble.
But this is the one moment I'm glad that he's paused and spending time, because this is a critical decision. And it'll all be worth it. All those minutes spent will be worth it if he plays knight takes pawn. That's a huge advantage. You go up a pawn, your bishop becomes a big piece here.
And of course, we have the aid of the eval bar here. We have the aid of some very powerful engines, but Alireza Firouzja, he has the aid of his fantastic instincts. He's paused for a reason. Magnus Carlsen will be jumping out of his chair if he sees the move knight takes e5. He's got to play it. He's got to find it.
Has to be played, right? Especially if you spend so much time and energy calculating this out. I feel like it should happen on the board.
But do you think if Magnus has spotted it, he'll give it away? Because he's also the kind of player who just keeps that poker face until his opponent has made his decision. The more Alireza thinks, I think the higher chances that he spots it.
Yep, he's going to spot it. Let's take a look at Alireza's screen, perhaps. It looks like he was about to push his pawn forward to d6. He does miss the opportunity. It was complicated. It was difficult. It was so hard to evaluate, but he could have played that move so much quicker. Now the black king castles. Status quo has been maintained. Magnus is holding this together with a pin.
But here's the thing, right? Because if Alireza did not go for knight takes pawn and wanted to make the move d6, again, you make it in 20 seconds. Right. But if you take your time, then you find that central blow.
Yep. I don't blame him at all for missing that. I think superhuman almost, that tactic. But what he's played, the fact that it took him over 2 minutes to play d6.
That's the problem.
That's big. That's the issue.
So now 7 minutes plays under 4. Unfortunately, familiar territory here in what potentially could be the last game. Remember, if Magnus Carlsen wins this game, he does not only win the set, he wins the match. So Firouzja needs to win, needs to find a way to crack open the position and take this.
I'm loving Yaman.
Stepped at the center of the board, and what Alireza has done is he slides his rook, defends the bishop, and now can go on to win a pawn. That e5 pawn, now that the bishop on b7 is guarded, knight takes e5. Alireza again, and he does it, but he takes it with his own pawn first, doubling up on the e file.
That's very surprising. He could have done the same thing, but in a more forceful way. If Black had taken with the knight, White would have been forced into a variation that could have happened anyway. He basically gave Magnus more choice. And although the position's still now level in the balance, Black with the bishop pair, Magnus might be breathing a sigh of relief. He has control over the diagonals for now, although still a harder position to handle. I think easier to play for Black, I'm going to say, because White's queenside pawns are slightly overextended, are slightly loose. And of course, we've been talking about bishops today. Alireza with that up his sleeve.
In an open game, right? And both bishops on the longest diagonal of the board. And guess what? The knight joining the party as well jumps onto that central d4 square. I wonder if Magnus will do the same. Go knight d5. There are tactics in the air. He might want to trade pieces off. But it looks like that might work in Magnus's favor if you jump with that knight to the d5 square, given the tension along the c line.
Well, that's a good way to trade pieces. Get Magnus closer to the draw that he needs.
Also frustrating that the queen can't just sidestep for Firouzja to c7 because of the ominous presence of White's dark square bishop, effectively meaning the queen stays on the d-line longer, increasing the probability that the queens come off at some point soon. We're trying our best to figure out a way to keep everything on, to keep the tension, to keep the complications, but I think Black is struggling to do that here. And again, opportunity to trade queens, and this time it's Magnus that says no, maybe playing on the clock pressure here as it goes to 6 versus 3.
Exactly, Magnus has sped up again. Not for the first time. He's barely spent over 30 seconds for a single move in this game. And look at this, pawn to e6, the first blunder of this game, the first mistake. The white rooks are going to hit the black queen. It could be over now. The black queen has no good squares. Wherever you go, there's a double attack or a fork. Magnus now looking at the fans, smiling. He knows he's close. He knows he's about to get it. Team Liquid on the edges of their seats.
He knows this is over. The knight about to jump in with a big fork in the position, going material up. Firouzja will fight. He will try to play this on, but I'm not even sure for how long. This is completely busted for Black. Magnus Carlsen vibing there.
There we go, knight for rook. Magnus has extra material. He's the exchange up. He's getting close now. The white rook's coming in. The white c-pawn sprinting forward. Firouzja has minimal counterplay. The white queen holds everything. Is this the final few moves of the Esports World Cup 2025? The black bishop trying to stem the tide, but it's desperate now.
Desperation on Firouzja. Magnus there, he wants to put the finishing touches as quickly as possible, but the whole show, the whole match by Magnus has been dominant so far.
This is absolutely incredible. Alireza Firouzja in a must-win situation. Magnus Carlsen had no business being this aggressive, gunning for this victory, but he only knows one mode. He truly has the heart of a champion, and he is displaying that here, saying, yes, I get that a draw is good enough, but here, watch what I can do.
Well, here at the Esports World Cup, he knows only one mode. That is that when liquid flows, it drowns everything.
Absolutely incredible stuff. Imperious from Magnus Carlsen, but it's not over yet. 5v2, material. Blunders can still happen. It is never over until it's over. He has to earn that full point.
Everything is earned here. Magnus Carlsen looking up. He's in calculation mode, trying to figure out if he can force it here and now. But there must be a little bit of a ghost in his mind. There was a blunder in game one of the second set when he had a winning position, up on time, up on the board. So Magnus, that's why he's double checking everything. That's why he's slowed down slightly. The longer this game goes on, the more hope for Firouzja. It's just a challenge, staying alive.
Remember, you make your own luck. You need to try and find a way to tempt Magnus into that mistake. Those mistakes do happen, but Firouzja needs to make it happen on command. Queens off the board, and victory looking that much more remote.
And Magnus needs only a draw to win the match. He doesn't even need to win this game. He's completely winning.
Look at this, the C pawn now forcing its way through. We're going to see the final move of the tournament.
Magnus Carlsen takes the victory. He wins game, set, and match against Team Falcons. Alireza Firouzja, Team Liquid will take home the 1,000 points for chess at the Esports World Cup. The GOAT reigns supreme, world #1, and now your Esports World Cup champion, Magnus Carlsen.
Incredible stuff. What a performance by Magnus in the semi-finals, taking down Hikaru Nakamura in an epic battle. Comes in today, completely steals the show. You know, they say chess is a simple game. 2 players play, Magnus Carlsen wins. This was absolute domination. And Team Liquid rises to the top, and the king stays on the top.
Fans on their feet, incredible scenes in that arena. Quick action replay here of the final few moves. But ultimately, Magnus had done the hard work. He won the exchange. He was already up in the match. He forced the queens off. Later, managed to push his pawn. And game over. Firouzja, unfortunately, helpless.
Incredible stuff. I mean, start from finish, right? You think about set 1, just everything he did, how he converted this, needing only a draw in this position. But you know what? He's just too good. He wins, goes on to win this game, a 3-1 victory in set 2. What a performance. Just brilliant stuff by Magnus, taking down the world #2. And finally, the firebrand, Alireza Firouzja.
Incredible scenes. Magnus looking fantastically happy as well in those graphics. There we see him with